My name is Shelli Bischoff. I'm going to be the facilitator for the day. That mostly means that I'm going to try to keep us on time and help us get to where we need to get to. I'm delighted to be here. So thank you for being here. This is really a momentous day for all of us who care so much about ensuring that people with disabilities can live in community settings in a stable, dignified, and productive manner. To provide inspiration and meaning for the day, we're going to start our day with Gina and Scott, and we're honored to have them here to share their story about how and why this is so important. So Gina and Scott, join us.
Oh my goodness, so much technology. I have to push my own buttons, hold my own microphone, and try to do an icebreaker at the same time. Good morning. Good morning. Oh, come on. There are over 100 people in this room. Let's try that again. Good morning. Good morning. Much better. Would like to start out our presentation with an icebreaker. Now, in order for this icebreaker to work, I am going to need everyone's active participation. This is what I would like you to do. When I ask you to raise your hand, I would like you to raise your hand nice and high. So let's give it a practice round. Everyone, please raise your hand. Oh yeah, my icebreaker might work. Here I have a $20 bill. I got hands up already. This is good. Raise your hand if you would like this $20 bill. That was not too difficult. But now it's all crumpled up. Again, this is your cue. Raise your hand if you still want this $20 bill. Huh, I actually think I have more hands up this time. That's pretty interesting. Now it's not only crumpled, it is very, very stomped upon. One last time, this is your cue. I got hands up already. Raise your hand if you still want this $20 bill. Huh. In the last minute, this $20 bill has been through some tremendous life experiences, but almost every single one of you found value in it. Like this $20 bill, there is worth and value in every single person. Took me a while to figure out that every single person meant me as well. I'd like to share a little bit about my story. I am choosing to put my story in human terms, not diagnostic terms. My favorite song is called Go Light Your World, and it begins like this. Have no fear, I am not going to sing. There is a candle within every soul. Some are burning brightly. Some are dark and cold. There was a time in my life where my candle of hope had completely burned out. During that time, there was a lot of chaos going on in my brain, and it was making it difficult for me to live in this world. At one point, when things got really, really tough, I barricaded myself in my bedroom. I was not coming out, and no one was coming in. I have a sister. Her name is Rachel. Rachel is always going to be about 11 or 12 emotionally and educationally. She would come downstairs every single day and sit by my bedroom door and stick her hand under the door frame and wiggle her fingers and say these words. Hey, Gina, do you see my hand? Do you see my hand? I know you're not ready to walk into the world just yet, but when you are, here's my hand. And I want to walk into the world with you. I wasn't ready, able, or willing to reach out and take Rachel's hand. And things got much, much worse. They had to break down the door. I was rushed to critical care of the hospital. My family, who has been with me through triumphs and struggles, came to visit. And Rachel crawls up onto my hospital bed, turns my face towards hers, and says, Gina, I love you. But I don't understand. Can you help me to understand? Rachel chose not to use any of those shake your finger words. All those words and phrases that when you say it, you can shake your finger at the same time. Gina, you're just lazy. Gina, you're never going to amount to anything. Gina, you're just not motivated to get well. Instead, Rachel was seeking to understand me from my perspective. And again, I was unable or unwilling to reach out and make that connection. After that came a series of hospital stays. At one point, when things were really, really rough, I was court committed to one hospital for 1 year, directly transferred to a second hospital for a second year, and then directly transferred to Harrisburg State Hospital in Pennsylvania. After several years in Harrisburg State Hospital, where in my opinion they used a lot of shake your finger words, I thought, man, this is not the place I want to be. And if they're not going to discharge me, I'm going to create my own discharge plan. So I did. I escaped from Harrisburg State Hospital. You can clap that if you'd like. Now, when you do that, you are considered a missing person. So I lived on the streets for a very brief period of time. If you have never lived on the streets, it's a very different and a very difficult life. So there's all this chaos going on in my brain, and I'm starting to get physically very, very ill. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I need a safe place to be. I know. I'll go to my grandmother's house. She lives in the backwoods of West Virginia. I'll hide out there until they have to discharge me. One, because they have to use my hospital bed for another person. Or two, I'd been out so long, I'd be a liability. Now, my mom has told me since I've been about this high, Gina, never, ever, ever take a ride from a stranger. But a trucker said he was going to West Virginia. So I hopped a ride with a trucker, fell asleep in the cab of the truck, and woke up in New York City with what I perceived as a very dangerous man coming after me. And there's that word perception again. So let's talk about it here for a moment. I got a lot of chaos going on in my brain. I'm physically pretty ill. I'm having experiences outside the consensus reality, and my entire body is filled with fear. And I'm reacting out of that fear. I'm literally hitting the streets of New York City, running, screaming, help me, God, at the top of my lungs. And right before I passed out, I remember seeing a New York City police officer. I woke up in a New York City hospital. Guess what? You can't be in two hospitals at one time. So they decided to discharge me from Harrisburg State. When I was physically able to go home, I still didn't have a lot of hope inside. But when I was physically able to go home, a social worker put me on the bus, and my dad picked me up in Pennsylvania. Now, this is many years later. As we are going down the driveway to our family home, there's Rachel, still holding hope for me. She's out on the porch, both hands in the air, going, my sister's home! My sister's home! My sister's home. Rachel chose to see something of worth and value in me. Now, Rachel couldn't light my candle of hope for me. All she could do was hold hope out there till I could take my unlit candle, light it off hers, and adopt hope for myself. We can't light other people's candles of hope for them, though I wish we could. But what we can do is what my favorite song says. If you are a hope-filled person, carry your candle, run to the darkness, and light up your world. It is when we light up our environments with hope that people in really deep, dark, and/or desperate places can begin to see other possibilities and pathways for their future. And that's how Scott and I define hope, as an acronym. H-O-P-E. How other possibilities emerge. We want to create hope-filled environments. We want to create a ripple effect of people believing in the human potential of other people. Okay, let's get back to my story. Shortly after returning to my family's home, I get a phone call. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they cannot want me to come back to Harrisburg State Hospital. There is no way. I will live on the streets again first. They did want me to come back. Not to use the services there again, but to be the peer supporter for the closing of the hospital. It was a life-transforming experience. As I walked with people, as they went from hospital to community, some for the first time in 16, 18, 20 years, and I watched them get out in the community and with the right opportunities begin to take back control of their own lives, my life was forever changed. I learned so many lessons during the closing of Harrisburg State Hospital. Thought I'd share one of the most important ones. I learned that our entire mental health system was transforming. We were moving from a what's wrong focus toward a what's strong focus. And what do I mean by that? Our traditional approach to delivering mental health services was focused on what I'll call a problem modality. People came in with a problem, so that's what we focused on. What's wrong with Gina? What can't she do? What are her symptoms? What is her diagnosis? What is Gina's disability? And then we stayed focused on the problem. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if you stay focused on the problem is going to take over your focus. In a recovery orientation, we are not ignoring people's struggles, but we have eyes that are seeking what's strong. What are Gina's strengths? What are her passions? What are her abilities? And how can Gina use her strengths, passions, and abilities to move beyond her mental health challenges and live the life that Gina wants to live? And I would be remiss if I didn't say it's really important that we support a person to match their strengths, passions, and abilities with right opportunities to succeed. I'll give an example. One of the gentlemen I had the honor to walk with as he went from hospital to community, he said I could share his story if I changed his name. So I'm going to do that to honor him. So we'll say his name is Tom. Tom talks with trees. I got to tell you, talking with trees at Harrisburg State Hospital, that's likely to get you a diagnosis. Where is Tom today? Tom is living in the community. He has a part-time job working in a department store garden shop. Talking to trees and plants in a garden shop? That's likely to get you Employee of the Month. So our entire system is changing from a focus on what's wrong toward a focus on what's strong. After the closing of Harrisburg State Hospital, I got a right opportunity. I got my very first full-time career job. My job was offering a 10-day, 75-hour certification training for peer support specialist. One person who self-identifies as being in recovery from mental health challenges and who is thinking about the possibility of work can be trained, certified, and paid to walk with another person as that person explores their own journey toward wellness and recovery. Today, Pennsylvania has just over 3,400 certified peer specialists making a difference in our state. You can clap at that as well. I can easily say, probably the least sensational, yet most beneficial part of my recovery journey has been work. Since getting a full-time career job, I've been able to acquire what I call the 3 B's. A place to be, a safe place to live, and a safe place to work. A place to belong, a place to be accepted and valued for who I am, perky, quirky, energetic, and all. And a place to become, a place to continue to learn and grow and reach for my potential. And I'm looking out in the audience And I know I sort of ride towards the creative mind, and a lot of you are policy, more practically minded. I'll put that in practical terms. Since getting a full-time career job, I've been able to get off of Social Security disability, having been on it for 17 years, have my own 3-bedroom home that has nothing to do with the mental health system. I hold the keys, I can go in and out, other people have to knock. Very different from a state hospital setting. And since getting a full-time career job in the year 2007, I haven't been hospitalized once. That's my story. Thank you. That's my story. Somebody else's story is going to be unique to them. But I truly believe that many of us with mental health challenges want the same thing that other active community citizens want. We want a home, a job, a date on the weekend, transportation to go places, and to live a long, healthy life. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who's going to talk about 2 initiatives Pennsylvania is using to promote active community citizenships. You guys have been great. Thank you. Did you hear that? Scott just said I could push his buttons. Just let you know that.
Let me give you some background on her pushing my buttons. There's a little more to the story than what she told you, so let me tell you the rest of the story. During the closure of Harrisburg State Hospital, I worked for our State Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. And so I was involved in the closure of Harrisburg State Hospital as a facilitator from the state side. Gina told you a little bit about her story and how she came providing peer support. Gina and I, this is the thing that you may not know the rest of the story, Gina and I met during the closure of the Harrisburg State Hospital, got to know each other as colleagues, got to respect each other, and then got to really know each other quite well. You never know what can come out of community inclusion, moving people from institutional
Date
settings.
on the weekend.
So the rest of the story is that during the closure, Gina and I got to know each other very well. We got to find affection and love and romance together. And Gina and I are now husband and wives, having gotten married in the chapel on the former grounds of Harrisburg State Hospital. That's the rest of the story. Although the story is still unfolding. We now get a chance to work together. This is awesome. My job is to talk to you a little bit about some of the initiatives that we're involved and continue to be involved in Pennsylvania as we move people. Not we move people, as we support people to move from institutional-based settings into the community. And Pennsylvania's been doing this now for a while. We really believe that a long, healthy life really needs to include a life in the community, living outside of institutional settings. So we've been promoting right-sizing, downsizing, and closing our state hospitals in Pennsylvania. And this is the really neat part. And transferring the resources, the money, the hospital budgets back into the community to support the development of services and supports for people who leave the institutional setting to go back into the community. It's kind of the original money follows the person. We've been doing it for years now. And it's, in Pennsylvania, we call it CHIPS, which is the Community Hospital Integration Projects Program. Very long term, so I won't refer to it again other than as CHIPS. The CHIPS is really a statewide initiative. It's at a system level. It really talks about, financing, and it talks about shifting resources at a state level, moving monies from the state hospital budget, which is a general revenue line item in our Pennsylvania budget. So this isn't Medicaid money. This is all state revenue monies. So it's an initiative to move purposefully those monies back into the community as we close hospitals, focusing on looking at how to move people who have complex needs, service needs, and long lengths of stay into other community situations. Next slide. The design of CHIPS is relatively straightforward. It really is to develop resources for successful community integration, to purposefully identify what are the services and supports that people are going to need to have to be successful in the community, taking a look at what services are already there, taking a look at new services that might need to be developed based on understanding the wants and desires and needs for people who are moving into the community, to develop new services, build local community capacity, increase capacity so that people can not only leave the institutional setting, but they don't have to come back again. I mean, part of the key is moving people into the community, but then the other really important aspect of that is supporting people so they don't go back into hospital-based settings. So setting up services, diversionary hospital type of services and supports like crisis intervention, crisis residential programs, ACT teams, PAC teams, things that can help people stay out of the hospitals. And then finally, as I alluded to in the last slide, it really is an initiative to make sure that the resources go back to the community so you can really support people so people don't end up in hospitals, don't end up in jails, don't end up on the streets. Because that's one of the criticisms about closing institutions, that people end up in other situations that are just as bad, if not worse. So in Pennsylvania, through this initiative, CHIPS, we have been able to transfer almost $267 million into our community system. $267 million have been transferred into the community system to develop infrastructure. 50% of that money has gone to housing. Pennsylvania has long supported and endorsed a housing-first approach. You know, people really need, as Gina talked about, a safe place to be, safe, affordable housing is a cornerstone to getting on with people's lives. Next slide. I talked about the kind of systemic initiative in terms of CHIPS. And CHIPS is really only one aspect of the initiative. The other aspect of the initiative is how do you move people from institutional-based settings into the community, but don't lose the individual. You know, if you have a system-wide approach, sometimes it's very easy to just look at, you know, big numbers like 266 million or how many people have moved. But how do you get down at the individual level to ensure that people have their own ability to express what they need and what they want to live successfully in the community? So that we had developed something, a process that was complementary to the CHIPS, which is called the CSP, the Community Support Plan. The Community Support Plan is really based on the idea that for people to have success in the community, there's an important ingredient to the formula, and that is that people have to have choice. They have to have the ability to know what options are available in the community and have the information to make informed choice about what they'd like to be doing. Where would they like to live? Who would they like to be living with? Would they like to be in a rural setting, an urban setting? Where would they like to spend their time? Would they like to pursue education? Would they like to go back to work? What in the community would be important in terms of their interests and hobbies? So choice, informed choice, plus honoring and respecting and having the process really driven by the person's voice is critical to success for living in the community. The person's, right from the beginning, the one who is basically talking about what would give meaning in my life, what would make it worthwhile for me to feel as though I'm an active and important component of the community, that I'm an active community citizen. So during the closure of Harrisburg State Hospital, we decided to throw out discharge planning. The normal discharge plan routine, we threw out the window for the closure. And we developed a comprehensive community support plan and process. This is an example of that document. It's 14 pages. It's very comprehensive. I think you can get a copy of it electronically from Deb.
Gonna go like this, Deb? Yay!
Again, I'm talking this use of the community support plan in the context of our state hospital system, but in Pennsylvania we are also now using it in our Money Follows the Person program, because it's a very comprehensive plan that is based, really starting with, and Gina's going to talk about that in a moment, starting with early on capturing the voice of the individual in terms of what would be important and meaningful for them, and making sure before anybody sits down around the table to talk about a community support plan that the person's wishes and desires are captured early on. So let me just, many of you probably know this, the difference between discharge planning and community support planning. How would those be contrasted? Let's take a look at the distinction. I spent 17 years working on our state hospital system as a treatment team director and then as a unit director. And I participated in many, many multidisciplinary treatment teams as a clinical psychologist. I'll share with you what my experience had been for many years working in our state hospital systems. Treatment team meetings and discharge planning tend to follow a pretty predictable routine. The treatment team would meet without the person there. We would look at what the person's presenting problems were. Remember the problem-oriented record? What got people into the hospital? What were their disabilities? What was their disabilities? What were their problems? And we would take a focus as we formulated discharge plans. What did we think the person needed to do in the community to help manage their symptoms? It was very much a symptom-focused approach. We thought the best we could really do is help a person to manage their symptoms in the community and thereby maybe help to either prevent or forestall for some period of time rehospitalization. So it was an approach where we focused on what's wrong. We, the team, being the experts, said here's what we think the person needs to do to manage their symptoms. Here's where they need to live. Here's the treatment options that are necessary to help them to be as, well as possible or stable. We didn't use terms well, we used stable. To be as stable as possible. And then we decided often in terms of the housing option would be the next logical, less restrictive or least restrictive, lesser restrictive setting than what the hospital was. So we would often just have sort of a formula. If you go to the hospital and you're going to the community, your next housing option is going to be a group home or some other highly structured residence. There was no option of choices in terms of housing. It was a step-down approach. We would formulate all that, we would put it on the discharge plan, and then we'd call the individual into the room and say, we'd like you to participate in your discharge plan. Please sign here. And then sometimes we were surprised when people said they didn't want to sign. But because this, the line said, I have participated in. Well, that wasn't really what was going on. And that was traditional discharge planning in a hospital. So we decided with the closure of Harrisburg State Hospital that we were going to throw that whole process out. Not only the discharge plan, but the whole process was going to change. If you get a chance to look at the comprehensive support plan, you'll see the first 2 pages of that include a person's strengths, passions, abilities, their hopes, dreams, and goals. The individual not only won't be called in to sign after the plan is developed, the discussion of the plan won't take place without the person not only being present, but having the option even before they get into the meeting to talk with somebody about what their hopes and dreams are and to explore what options might be available. So they're coming in having the same knowledge that the team has in terms of what resources or options might be in the community so that we're leveling the playing field. The individual talks with the team about housing options. CHIPS dollars were used in the development of new housing options based on taking a look at combining all the community service plans for a group of individuals that were going to go back to the community. And we'd look at some of the housing options that people indicated they wanted to have and other services and supports they were interested in. And we took a look, aggregately, were those housing options and services and supports available in that community? If not, the CHIP dollars, the monies, actually went ahead of the person so that we could develop those services in the community so they would be ready when people were being discharged from the hospital. So we used bridge funding to make sure the services and supports were there before people left the hospital. The CSP process was again, driven by the person, the individual. We also did assessments, and assessments are important to collect information, but we did 3 distinct special kind of assessments, and Gina's going to talk about how those occurred.
All right, so 4 to 6 months before a person would ever have their very first community support planning meeting, 3 things occurred. 1, hospital staff would meet with community providers, and their task was to talk about what are the strengths a person has to live in the community and what are some of the possible needs. NAMI would meet with family members to really assess the level of support family members might offer a person as they go from hospital to community, and from the family members' perspectives, what were the strengths of the person. And then certified peer specialists would meet with people, the people that were actually making the transition from hospital to community. And our job was to develop a relationship with the person and just allow the person to begin to see community living as a real possibility for their own lives. During the closure of Harrisburg State Hospital, I had the honor to walk with 70 people as they went from hospital to community. And each and every person was unique, and I learned so much from each and every individual. But I did notice that my engagement strategies fell into 3 different categories. There were some people that were like me. They said, hey, Gina, now that you have the keys, just open the door and we'll find our own way to the community. Thank you very much. There were some people that were a little more planful. They would say, hey, you know what? I haven't been in the community for 5, 6, 7 years. Help me to explore all of my choices and options. Walk with me as I have a few community experiences, and then I'll make my own individual informed choice about what I need and want. And then there were some people like Sally. And I had known Sally because we were at Harrisburg State Hospital at the same time. So when I began my work with Sally, she basically looked at me and she says, fine, Gina, if you are promoting all this voice and choice stuff, then my choice is to stay right here at Harrisburg State Hospital. I know you didn't like it here, but this is my home. Remember, my job's not to push Sally into the community. So I said to Sally, you're right. I did not like it here at Harrisburg State Hospital, but obviously you do. I'm curious. What is it you like about being here? And Sally says, well, I have a bed to sleep in every single night. I'm not sleeping on the streets. I have 3 meals a day and sometimes a snack. And unlike you, Gina, I listen to staff, so I have full ground privileges and I have friends all over the campus. Those are some very good reasons to want to stay at Harrisburg State Hospital. So as our relationship developed, one day I just said to Sally, I said, we're not closing the hospital right away. Is there anything we can do to make your stay at Harrisburg State Hospital any better? That was the day I got my in. Because Sally, she was about my size, much wider, and she was just over 70 years old, and her eyes lit up. And she says, oh, Gina, I got myself a man in the Petrie building, which was another building on campus. And he and I want to make some love. And we both have single beds. And we both have roommates. So making love's impossible. You could get me a queen-size bed with a romantic blue comforter in a private room. I would be ever so grateful. Man, in the back of my brain, I'm thinking that's something I might be able to make happen in the community. So just for fun, we began to talk about our dream bedrooms. And I noticed that Sally was quite the artist. She was drawing floor plans of everything we were talking about. And I said to Sally, I know you are not leaving Harrisburg State Hospital, but some of your best friends are going back to the community very soon, and they need bedrooms. Could I show your drawings to some community providers that are building new housing? She said I could take her drawings, show them. She signed them to make sure that she got credit, but she was not going to the community with me. So I showed them to a few community providers. Most of them did pat me on the head and said, oh, these are nice, but we have our own plans, except for one. One community provider asked me the story behind the drawings. So I shared with him a little bit about Sally. He said, would you mind if I had 2 staff go on and introduce themselves to Sally at the hospital? I said, let me check with Sally. She was okay with that. So this provider organization had 2 staff that came in and began to develop a relationship with Sally, validating Sally's strengths, talking to Sally about having a queen-size bed, talking to Sally about how making love is a good thing and could happen in this housing unit. And all of a sudden, I walked up to see Sally one day. She had all of her bags packed, and she says, "I don't need a CSP meeting. I'm ready to go back to the community today, thank you." So with haste, we put together a community support planning meeting, which Scott's going to talk just briefly about what that meeting would look like.
Thank you.
Am I pushing your buttons?
Doing excellent, thank you. So, I mentioned about the CSP plan itself, but the plan is really just one small aspect of it. The process is really the key ingredient here, the process for developing the plan. And up here is kind of the circle of support to give you a visual of who might be involved in the usual community support plan meeting. I just, again, want to emphasize to you, we often get hung up on like the forms and completing the forms. The form here is just to help lead us and guide us through the process. It's the process of developing the community support plan which really is the key ingredient. That you have the circle of support. You have people at the table who are going to give their input, share their ideas, but also take responsibility to help support the individual when they do leave the institutional-based setting back into the community. So the person's not alone. The person's at the center, and the person you can have in your circle of support people that you would expect. The hospital staff would be there, a multidisciplinary team, family and friends as the person deems they would like to have them there. Peer support, Gina mentioned, community and county staff. Community and county staff, community staff or community service providers could be across systems. It could be drug and alcohol. It could be probation and parole, mental health. We had one lady who was a parent. She had lost custody of her children to children and youth. She wanted to live back in the community in a housing situation that would allow her to get her children back. So we invited children and youth to talk about how that might happen. Family advocate, consumer advocate. We also had two people that were kind of unique to this community support planning process, and that would be the facilitator and the recorder. We purposefully wanted to have someone facilitate the meeting who had no particular agenda. They didn't represent the hospital, they didn't represent the community, they didn't represent family or the person, but they were a neutral facilitator who went through a process of training. We had specially trained facilitators. I had the opportunity to be one of those. As facilitators, we learned how the values behind the CSP process and the principles and how to facilitate a meeting where everybody's voice got to be presented, everybody's opinions and options got to be validated, but that at the end of the day, we did not sign a completed CSP form until everybody was in agreement. Everybody had to agree to sign on to it. And Gina's going to talk a little bit more about how that process occurred. The recorder was instrumental in helping us to stay on track. In between meetings, we had homework assignments. People had to figure out if information wasn't there at the last meeting and who was going to get that information. If people needed to be present in the next meeting and they weren't there, who was going to invite them from the community or from the family that needed to be there. Gina's going to talk a little bit more about that.
We thought it was important to end with a story. So I'm choosing John's story. His actual name is John. He said if I was going to share his story, I needed to use his real name. So his real name is John. John was the person that had the most community support planning meetings before we could all mutually agree on a plan. So I'd like to share his story. John and I met about 4 months before his very first community support planning meeting. And he assured me that he already knew what he needed and wanted to live and recover in the community. What he wanted from me was if this was truly a person-driven process, he wanted to facilitate his own meetings. He didn't want some outside facilitator. He wanted to do his own meetings. So I talked to his facilitator, David, and David and John got together and they decided to co-facilitate his community support planning meetings. So the first meeting arrived, and there are all the usual people in the room, family members, myself, a peer supporter, the hospital staff, community staff, the facilitator, the recorder, and John. And John looked around the room and he says, I know everyone in the room, but I don't think you know each other. So let's do introductions. I'm going, whew, okay, he's a good facilitator. This is good. So we did introductions, and after introductions, he leans forward and he says, I'll get the meeting started by letting you know what I need and I want to live and recover in the community. I need to be off all my psychiatric medications. I need to have nothing to do with the stinking mental health system. And I need to have my own home in the woods away from all of society. As you can imagine, chaos broke loose. The psychiatrist is trying to just make a statement about why he didn't think it was a good idea for John to go off all of his medications. The family member, out of fear, is talking about the last time John was in the community and he isolated himself. Fire broke loose. And I got to tell you, I couldn't hear anyone else, but I did hear John. He looked at me and he says, yeah, so much for it being my meeting and about my voice and about my choice. So I put both hands in the air and I said, hey, everyone, you know what? I already hear voices. When there's a lot of crosstalk, I can't actively listen to anyone in the room. So it would be really helpful if we could all talk one at a time and share our perspectives. And I first want to validate John's goals. I would like to be so healthy that I don't need to be on any medications. You know what? I'd like to be so healthy that I don't need mental health services. And I'd like to have enough money to have my own home in the woods away from society at points. I think those are good goals. Our job here in this meeting is to partner with John to take the first step for him to begin reaching his own goals in the community-based setting. I got to tell you, these psychiatrists changed the course of the entire meeting. He looked at John and he says, okay, you're telling me we have a disagreement around medications. I'm going to plan a half an hour tomorrow where you and I can sit down and have a conversation, man to man. What do you think about that? John stands up, shakes the psychiatrist's hand, and it changed the course of the entire meetings. And next, the next meeting, we began to talk about housing. John said his first goal, he still wanted to build a home in the woods, but his first goal was to not live in the city. He wanted to live in a rural area where he had his own place. He had his own key. He could go in and out, and other people, including staff, had to knock. We could do that. There's a lot of rural areas in Pennsylvania. At our next meeting, we talked about if John really wanted to build his own home in the woods, how was he going to get the money? He said he wanted to get a job. So we introduced him to psychiatric rehabilitation services, where he could learn to use a computer, learn to write a resume. Today, John is living in a CHIP apartment. He has his own key. Staff has to knock. He goes to psychiatric rehabilitation services twice a week. He would go more often because he loves it, but he has a part-time job working at a car wash. And he likes that too. He has discretionary funds in his pocket. He is really enjoying life in the community. He has not given up his goals, but he is fully living in the community as he works towards reaching those goals. And isn't that what community integration is all about? It's giving people the opportunity to create a healthy life of choice. Thank you, everyone.
So much. Gina, did you shut this off? No. Gina and Scott, you were wonderful. Thank you. What a wonderful way to start the day. I don't know about you all, but I don't know, institutions, transition, hope, dreams, and romance. Oh my gosh, what could be better? Can we just call this the integration plan for hopes and dreams? I mean, really. Thank you so much. That was just really wonderful.